Tristan Duvall was halfway through a charred hot dog and deeply regretting accepting the invitation when he saw her baseball cap, apron, and a spatula in hand, flipping burgers like her life depended on it. This was not how his Sunday was supposed to go. He was used to private rooftop brunches, not folding chairs and lukewarm lemonade. But his assistant had begged him to attend her brother's neighborhood BBQ, insisting it would ground him. So now here he was CEO of Duvall Enterprises, a man whose net worth was discussed in business magazines, awkwardly standing next to a kiddie pool while someone's golden retriever drooled on his Italian loafers. But then he locked eyes with her, and everything else blurred. "Burger or hot dog?" she asked, voice light but firm, like she'd been commanding grills her whole life. "Burger," he replied, stepping forward. "Medium, please." She raised an eyebrow. "You think you're at a steakhouse, don't you?" He bit back a laugh. "Not exactly." She flipped a patty and slid it onto a bun like a pro. "Then you're getting it how I make it, and you'll like it." He took the burger, still watching her. "Deal, name's Bailey," she added, nodding toward the cooler with soda cans. "Help yourself, I'm not your waitress." "Tristan," he said, taking a sip of lukewarm cola and somehow not caring. "Nice to meet you, Bailey." She didn't fawn over his designer shoes or the fact that his watch probably cost more than most cars on this street. In fact, she didn't seem to recognize him at all. That was refreshing. "Tristan what?" she asked, squinting at him like she was trying to place his face. "Duvall," her eyes narrowed. "As in Duvall, like the billion-dollar real estate company." He gave a small nod, already bracing himself for the questions, the shift in tone, but it didn't come. "Cool," she said casually. "You want onions or not?" He blinked. Yeah, sure." She piled on the onions, handed him a paper plate, and turned back to the grill like she hadn't just served a billionaire a burger. Later, after dodging a cornhole game and faking interest in a conversation about lawn fertilizer, he found himself wandering back to the grill. "You always cook at these things?" he asked, leaning against the side of the table. Bailey flipped a hot dog and shrugged. "I live on this street. I volunteer, plus I don't trust Steve with raw meat. Guy thinks medium rare means burnt to a crisp." Tristan laughed genuinely. "You're good at it." She glanced at him. "What grilling?" "That and this, holding your own. You don't seem fazed." "By what?" "You being rich?" she asked, wiping her hands on a towel. "I've met rich guys. Most of them are boring. You're only borderline boring." He nearly choked on his soda. "That's the nicest thing anyone's said to me all week." She smiled, and for a second, he forgot about the boardroom, the 3 pending acquisitions, and the gala he was supposed to fly out for tomorrow. "What do you do, Bailey?" he asked. "Besides out-grill Steve." "I run a small catering business," she said. "Mostly weddings, parties, corporate luncheons, nothing fancy." "That sounds impressive." She tilted her head skeptically. "You're not just saying that 'cause I fed you, are you?" "No," he said, watching her more carefully now. "I mean it." Bailey didn't seem like the kind of woman who needed validation, but she appreciated honesty. He could tell. The sun started to dip lower, casting long shadows over the lawn. Kids ran past, screaming about popsicles. Someone turned up bad country music, and still Tristan stayed. "You're not from around here," she said, tossing a used napkin into the trash. "I'd remember." "No, I'm not," he paused, "but I'm glad I came." Bailey's eyes met his. Something changed. "You always this charming at backyard BBQs, or is this a once-a-year performance?" He grinned. "To be honest, I don't usually go to these kinds of things." "So what made you come to this one?" He looked at her, really looked at her. "I guess I didn't know I needed to." Bailey blinked, caught off guard. A long beat passed. Then she shook her head, lips twitching. "You're full of it, you know that." "Maybe," Tristan said, stepping closer, "but I meant every word." They stood there in silence for a moment, the air between them thicker than it had any right to be at a BBQ. "Want a tour of the neighborhood?" she asked suddenly, grabbing a water bottle and tossing him another. "I'd love that." She led him down the sidewalk, pointing out houses and laughing at old stories. He listened not just to her words, but to the way she said them. Confident, sharp. No filter, but never cruel. He liked that. They ended up at her front porch, a cozy little place with flower pots and a wind chime that tinkled softly in the breeze. "This yours?" he asked. "Yep, bought it with every penny I had saved. Took me years." "It's not much, but it's mine. It's perfect," Tristan said quietly. Bailey glanced at him, something flickering in her eyes. "You know, you're not so bad for a billionaire. And you're not so bad for someone who just called me boring," she laughed. "Touché." He didn't want to leave, not yet. "Would you maybe," he started, then stopped. "Would you have dinner with me sometime, a real one, no paper plates?" Bailey raised a brow. "You mean like steak on a rooftop kind of dinner?" "Exactly." She looked at him for a long moment, then smiled. "All right, billionaire. You're on." He smiled back, and for the first time in months, something inside his chest felt light. He'd come here expecting to shake hands and make small talk. He never expected to meet Bailey Newton. And he definitely never expected she'd be the one to flip his whole world upside down with nothing but a spatula and a smirk. Tristan adjusted the cuffs of his shirt as the elevator climbed toward the top floor of the Haldon Hotel, the private dining suite already prepared. He'd sent a car to collect Bailey, choosing not to ride with her. He didn't want her to feel cornered. This evening wasn't about impressing her with wealth. It was about showing her he listened. The elevator doors opened silently, revealing a room drenched in warm, golden light. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the skyline, and a single round table sat near the glass, set for two. A jazz trio played softly in the corner, the melody barely louder than a heartbeat. He glanced at the time. 7:30. She was punctual. The door behind him opened, and then she stepped in. Bailey wore a midnight blue pantsuit, tailored to perfection but unpretentious. Her hair was swept up, not in an elaborate updo, but in a loose twist that looked like she'd done it herself. She looked like she didn't want to impress anyone, yet somehow she still did. "You really went all in, huh?" she said, taking in the view. "You said yes. I figured that deserved effort." Bailey wandered to the window, her gaze settling on the lights below. "I've delivered food to places like this. Never thought I'd be the one eating in them." He pulled out her chair. "Tonight you're not working, you're my guest." She sat, eyeing the table settings. "You always do this kind of thing for your dates." He poured her a glass of wine. "I don't usually ask women out. And yet you're good at it," she said, lifting the glass. "I'm almost suspicious." "You should be," he replied, easing into his seat. "I'm very good at hiding my motives." Bailey tilted her chin. "And what's your motive tonight, Tristan?" He met her eyes. "To learn what keeps you up at night." The jazz faded into something softer. Bailey leaned back, folding her arms loosely. "All right," she said. "You want honesty, you'll get it." He nodded once. "I worry about my next invoice getting paid on time," she said. "I worry about the food truck's brakes giving out again. I worry that I'm building something people only remember when they need last-minute catering and not because they trust me." Tristan rested his hands on the table, listening without interruption. "And I worry that the more I push myself to grow, the lonelier it gets. People see ambition as a threat, especially when you're not wearing a suit and don't have a last name people recognize." He didn't reach across the table. He didn't offer platitudes. He simply said, "That's not nothing." Bailey shrugged. "I didn't come here for pity." "Good." "I wasn't offering it." The server arrived then, presenting the first-course lobster bisque with saffron cream. Bailey blinked at the dish, her expression unreadable. "I Googled your business," Tristan said quietly after the server left. "Newton's Table. Your reviews are perfect. You looked me up. I had to know if you were real." "I am," she said, "even if I don't come with a Wikipedia page." He smiled. "I liked that you didn't." She dipped her spoon into the bisque. "You probably think I'm going to be overwhelmed by all this. I think you're going to enjoy dessert." Bailey laughed then, a short, surprised sound. "You're not what I expected, neither are you," he said. "I thought you were just the woman in an apron who wasn't impressed by my last name." "I'm still not impressed by your last name." "Good. I'd rather you remember who I am without it." They moved through the meal slowly, conversation shifting from food to music to childhood memories. Bailey told him about a broken oven at her first wedding job and how she had to finish the entrees using 3 camping stoves and a borrowed blowtorch. Tristan told her about the time he'd lost a $1 million client because he refused to lie to secure the contract. "That cost you $1 million?" she asked, stunned. It cost me a lot more than that, but yes. Would you do it again, in a heartbeat? Bailey leaned forward, resting her elbow on the table. So you're not completely heartless? Not completely, he said. Though my board might argue otherwise. The server cleared their plates and brought over a tray with 2 miniature cakes, 1 chocolate, 1 lemon. I didn't know which you preferred, he said. So I asked for both. Bailey reached for the lemon. You guessed right, lucky or observant. They ate in comfortable silence for a few moments. The lights outside glittered like 1,000 promises, then Bailey glanced at him. You dropped something earlier at the BBQ. He raised an eyebrow. Did I? Yeah. When I asked why you came, I told you. She shook her head. You said you didn't know you needed to. That's not the same as why. Tristan looked out the window, the truth pressing against the back of his teeth. I needed to remember that not everything can be controlled. That not every part of me needs to be polished and prepared. Bailey set down her fork. That's a heavy reason to show up to a cookout. It was a last resort. She studied him, her expression softer now. Most people just take a vacation. I don't know how to rest, he admitted. But I knew if I didn't get out of the city, I'd drown in it. And now I'm sitting across from someone who doesn't want anything from me. Bailey leaned back, folding her arms again. You think I don't want anything? Not in the way most people do. She tilted her head, thoughtful. Maybe I want to see if the man behind the skyline views and tailored suits has any real bruises. Tristan's jaw tightened. I have a few. I bet, she said, her voice low, but I'm not here to fix them. I'm not asking you to. The silence returned, but it wasn't heavy. It was full. Bailey stood and he followed. The trio's melody faded with the closing of the elevator doors behind them. Outside, the city air was warm and restless. His driver waited nearby, but Bailey waved off the offer. I'll walk, she said. Clear my head. Tristan hesitated, then asked, Will I see you again? She didn't answer right away. Then she met his gaze and said, That depends on whether you mean it. Mean what? That you want to know me. Not just the version I show you when I've had time to rehearse. He stepped closer, his voice low. I meant every word I said tonight. Bailey nodded once, then turned and disappeared into the rhythm of the street. Tristan didn't move for a long while. Somewhere between the first question and the last bite of lemon cake, he'd stopped seeing her as a surprise. She was becoming a necessity. Bailey didn't give him an answer for 4 days. Tristan kept checking his phone between back-to-back meetings, his attention fractured in ways it hadn't been in years. Contracts blurred. Presentations felt hollow. The string of boardroom accomplishments rang quieter than usual. Then late on a Thursday afternoon, his assistant stepped into his office. There's someone asking for you downstairs, she said. No appointment, he glanced up, distracted. Who? She wouldn't give her last name, said you'd know her. She's wearing a chef's jacket and holding a box. He was on his feet before she finished the sentence. Bailey stood in the marble lobby like she owned it chin high, eyes sharp, one hand balanced on a cardboard box stamped with Newton's table in red ink. She wore no makeup. Her ponytail was slightly windblown, but her presence was impossible to ignore. I brought lunch, she said before he could speak. You came all the way downtown for that? No, she said. I came to ask you something. He nodded toward the elevator. Upstairs, she hesitated. Only if it's not going to get me accused of corporate espionage. My board's afraid of bad headlines, not women holding pastries. He led her into his office, the city stretching out behind his floor-to-ceiling windows. She set the box down on his conference table and popped the lid. Inside were 6 miniature tarts, each a different flavor, arranged with careful precision. He raised an eyebrow. Testing me, tempting you, she said. I'm pitching for the Dobson Gallery Events contract. If I get it, I'll need a commercial kitchen. That requires capital. The kind I don't have lying around, he studied her. And you think I might be interested in investing? No, she said evenly. I think you might be interested in helping me get in the room. That's all I'm asking, a name on an email. A foot in the door. You don't want money, I want opportunity, she said. I'll earn the rest. Tristan walked to the window, hands in his pockets. The Dobson contract is competitive, I know. They usually go with catering firms that have a team of 10 or more. I know that too, he turned back to her. You're asking me to put my name behind yours. That's not a small ask. Bailey met his gaze. You're not a small man, he laughed, surprised. Is that flattery? No, she said. It's a reminder. You built a company people trust. I'm asking to borrow that trust for 5 minutes. He picked up a tart and took a bite. The crust was crisp, the filling bright with lemon and rosemary. He didn't speak until he'd finished the last crumb. I'll make a call, he said, but only if you let me sit in on the pitch, she blinked. Why? Because I want to see what you look like when you win. Bailey crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. You do realize I'm not sleeping with you for a reference, right? He smiled. That idea hadn't crossed my mind. Liar. He walked over to her and lowered his voice. If I wanted something from you, Bailey, I'd ask for it. And I'd expect you to say no if you weren't interested. Her mouth twitched, but she didn't look away. You're very good at towing the line. I'm not interested in the line, he said. I'm interested in you. She stepped back, grabbing the box lid. Then don't screw this up. Wouldn't dream of it. She left without another word, and Tristan stood in the silence of his office, the taste of her tart still on his tongue and the scent of rosemary lingering in the air. That night, he sent an email to the Dobson Gallery director. Short, direct. Just enough to open the door. Bailey responded 2 hours later with a calendar invite for a pitch meeting 4 days later. When the day came, she walked into the gallery's minimalist conference room in a charcoal gray sheath dress, her hair pulled into a braid and a binder in hand. Tristan arrived minutes after her and slipped into the corner silent. She didn't look at him once during the presentation. Instead, she owned the room. She spoke about culinary storytelling, about how food could elevate not just taste but memory. She showcased event themes built around paintings, color palettes, even brush strokes. She passed around samples unlike anything he'd seen at a corporate event, miniature edible sculptures that mirrored the gallery's current exhibit. When she finished, the gallery director leaned back, visibly impressed. I've never seen a proposal like this, she said. Bailey smiled. Then let's make history. Afterward, outside the gallery, Tristan caught up to her on the sidewalk. You didn't need me in there, he said. I needed the door opened. Walking through it was mine. He nodded slowly. So what now? She looked up at him. You still offering steak? That night they dined at a restaurant tucked beneath a bridge where the lights were low and no one cared who he was. Bailey picked the wine. Tristan let her. They didn't talk about business or contracts or favors. They talked about her brother, who taught her how to ride a bike without training wheels, about the time he got his heart broken in college and didn't leave his apartment for 2 days. About the house she almost bought in a different city and how glad she was she didn't. When the check came, he reached for it automatically. Bailey stopped him. This one's mine, he paused. Are you sure? I'm not here for your money, Tristan. I know you're not. But I need you to remember that. I do. She paid and they walked out into the night, the wind tugging at the hem of her coat. At the curb, she turned to him. This isn't going to be simple. I don't want simple, he said. Bailey touched his lapel lightly. You're used to control. I'm not going to give it to you. His voice was soft. Good. She stood on her toes, kissed him once slow and certain, and stepped back. Then she walked away, leaving him standing beneath the street lamp, heart thudding like the first time he signed a deal that changed his life. Except this time he hadn't signed anything. He'd simply said yes. The Dobson contract came through. Bailey found out on a Wednesday afternoon, standing in the walk-in fridge of a borrowed kitchen prepping for a last-minute engagement party. She didn't scream or cry. Instead, she closed her eyes, leaned her head against a shelf lined with lemons, and exhaled. She called Tristan that night not to celebrate, but to ask if he could meet her the next morning. He arrived at her house just after sunrise, still in his gym clothes, hair damp from a shower. She was on the porch, coffee in hand, wearing a loose t-shirt and leggings dusted in flour. I didn't wake you, did I? She asked. No, he said, but I wasn't expecting you to look like you've already run a bakery before 7. I had a tasting come up last minute, but this couldn't wait. He sat beside her on the swing, the wood creaking gently under their weight. I got the contract. He turned to her, jaw tensing briefly before his expression softened. I had a feeling. I'm moving into a bigger space, signed a lease last night. It's not fancy, but it's mine. He reached for the mug in her hand, took a sip without asking. You're not surprised. I'm terrified, she admitted, but I'm not surprised. Bailey glanced down at her lap, then back at him. I've been thinking a lot about what it means to build something, not just a business, something that lasts. He nodded slowly. I think about that too, more than I used to. Do you think it's possible, she asked, to have both, the thing you build and the person you build it with? He looked out at the neighborhood, still quiet, the street dappled with morning light. I didn't used to. But then you showed up with a box of tarts and made me want more than a skyline. She didn't smile, she didn't reach for him, she just said, come with me. He followed her through the house to the small room at the back. The walls were bare, but architectural sketches and menu drafts lined the desk. In the corner, a corkboard held photos, the first wedding she catered solo, a note from her niece in crayon, a clipping of a review that called her cooking unapologetically bold. I want to turn this into something bigger, she said. Not a chain, not mass-produced, but something rooted in this. In people, in honesty? Then do it. I want you to be part of it. He turned toward her. You mean the business? I mean all of it, she said. The late nights, the bad deliveries, the mornings where I forget to eat because I'm trying to fix a spreadsheet. I want you in the mess. Tristan stepped forward, closing the space between them. You're offering me chaos. I'm offering you something real. His voice dropped. What if I've never been good at real? Then I'll teach you, she said. One burnt scone at a time. He laughed quietly, then reached into his jacket pocket and handed her a folded envelope. What's this? Open it, she did, unfolding a single page, a property listing with a note scribbled at the bottom in his handwriting. Commercial kitchen. Lots of light. Close enough to deliver to Dobson in under 15 minutes, she read aloud. Why does this address look familiar? Because it's 2 blocks from here. She looked up sharply. You bought it? No, he said. You did. I just handled the paperwork. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the page. You didn't even ask me. I knew you'd say yes if it was yours. Bailey stared at him, eyes searching. Why? Because, he said, I've never met anyone who fights for what they love the way you do. She let the page fall to the desk and stepped into him, her voice barely above a whisper. I love this, what I do, what it's becoming. He touched her cheek lightly. And what about me? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached up and slid her fingers into his hair, pulling him down until their foreheads touched. You terrified me, she said softly, because you're not a maybe. You're a yes I wasn't ready for. And now, I'm ready. He kissed her then, not like the first time, tentative and electric. This was deeper. Certain, the kind of kiss that felt like a door closing behind them and a new one opening in front. When they pulled apart, she rested her hand against his chest. You still owe me dinner. I'll cook, he said. She raised an eyebrow. You can cook. No, but I'll try. Bailey grinned, the first full one he'd seen from her that morning. Then I'm bringing a fire extinguisher. 3 months later, Newton's table moved into its new space. The launch party was packed press, potential clients, neighbors, and a few confused art critics who came for the Dobson connection and stayed for the food. Bailey wore a deep rust-colored wrap dress and greeted each guest by name. Tristan stood at the back, watching her work the room with ease, pride flickering in his chest. When she finally reached him, he handed her a flute of champagne. You look like you belong in a magazine, he said. I look like I haven't slept in 4 days. Still, she studied him. You're not used to being the one in the background. I'm exactly where I want to be. She touched his tie, adjusting it slightly. You know what I realized? What? You didn't fall in love with me because I grilled burgers at some neighborhood BBQ. No, you fell in love with me because I didn't care who you were. He leaned in, voice low. You're wrong. She tilted her head. I fell in love with you because you're the only person who saw who I was before I did. Bailey didn't respond. She kissed him instead, in full view of everyone. There were no cameras, no press releases. Just 2 people, one who built skyscrapers, the other who built kitchens, finally standing on the same ground. And for the first time in either of their lives, it felt like home. The morning of the Dobson Gallery's first official gala under Bailey's catering partnership arrived with a rare, weightless calm. Tristan lay still beside her, one arm draped across her waist, his breath warm against the curve of her shoulder. The city buzzed just outside the bedroom window, but inside, time moved slower. Bailey turned onto her side, propping herself up on one elbow. "You're not going to check your phone," he opened one eye. "No crises allowed before coffee." She traced a finger along his collarbone. "You're slipping." The Tristan I met would have had 3 calls scheduled and a helicopter waiting by now. "I traded the helicopter for pancakes," he said, voice low. "You make better landings." She laughed, then pushed herself upright. "I still have to go in early. I'll drive you," he offered, sitting up with her. "You don't have to, I want to." Bailey didn't argue. She'd long since stopped questioning the ways he showed up. The car ride was quiet but not tense. Comfortable. She watched his hand rest on the gearshift, the way his fingers tapped in rhythm to the jazz playing softly through the speakers. "I invited my father tonight," she said, not looking at him. Tristan blinked once. "You haven't spoken to him in years." "I know, but he called last week, said he saw the write-up in the paper. Thought it was time." "What changed?" "I think he finally realized I wasn't going to fail." Tristan didn't speak for a moment. "Then, do you want me to meet him?" Bailey turned then, her expression unreadable. "Would that be okay?" "I'd prefer it." She nodded once, then looked ahead again. "He might ask weird questions. He's not subtle." "I don't need subtle, I just need the truth." That night, the gallery transformed. The halls glowed with soft amber light, and the scent of thyme and roasted fruit drifted through the air. Bailey moved through the space in a forest green gown, her hair swept back in soft waves. She wasn't just the caterer tonight, she was the name on every guest's lips. Tristan arrived separately, stepping out of a black car in a slate gray tuxedo, tailored so precisely it looked like it had been woven onto him. He didn't seek her out immediately. He watched her from a distance as she spoke with donors, curators, and the occasional wide-eyed intern. When she finally reached him, she handed him a glass of something pale and dry. "You clean up all right." "I had to match you somehow." She leaned in, whispered, "My father's by the Picasso. I'll go to him." "You sure?" Tristan met her eyes. "For you." "Always." The conversation with her father was brief but meaningful. They shook hands, talked business. Tristan answered every question with steady, measured confidence. Bailey watched from across the room as the two men, so different in background and temperament, found common ground. Later, they slipped away to the rooftop terrace, a quiet escape from the buzz inside. The moon hung low, casting silver shadows across the stone floor. Bailey leaned on the railing, the city stretching out beneath them. "You know," she said, "I used to think I could only have one thing. The dream or the person. And now I have both." Tristan stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You gave me something I didn't think I deserved." She turned in his arms. "You didn't just deserve it. You earned it." He reached into his jacket pocket, not with the practiced ease of a showman, but with the quiet certainty of a man who'd made his decision long ago. She saw the small velvet box and froze. "Bailey," he said, voice steady, "I fell in love with you in pieces. Over burnt burgers, lemon tarts, and 1,000 moments you probably didn't even notice. I never planned for this, but I can't imagine a single day going forward without you." She stared at him, breath caught in her throat. "I'm not asking you to quit chasing your dreams. I'm asking you to let me run beside you." He opened the box. The ring was simple platinum, elegant, with a single oval diamond. "I want a life with you, the messy kind, the honest kind. Will you marry me?" Bailey didn't speak. She just nodded once, tears catching in her lashes as she whispered, "Yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she pulled him into a kiss that was less about fire and more about home. The room below buzzed with applause and clinking glasses. But up on the terrace, there was only silence and the steady thrum of two hearts finally in rhythm. They married 6 months later in a converted greenhouse, surrounded by wildflowers, friends, and the smell of fresh bread. Bailey wore a slip dress embroidered with tiny vines and held a bouquet of herbs instead of roses, sage, rosemary, and lavender. Tristan stood at the altar waiting, not with nerves but with awe, After the ceremony, they danced barefoot under fairy lights. The meal was served family-style, no servers, no speeches, just laughter and wine passed between hands. Newton's table expanded to 2 more locations in the following year, with Bailey at the helm and Tristan behind the scenes, never trying to steer, only to support. She still ran the tastings herself, he still handled the taxes. They traveled when they could, small towns, hidden valleys, cities neither of them had ever seen. But they always came home to the same place, the little house with the wind chime and the porch swing. Some nights she'd fall asleep with flour on her cheek, and he'd brush it off gently, not waking her. Some mornings, he'd read the paper in bed while she made coffee in the kitchen, humming off key. They never stopped challenging each other. They never stopped choosing each other. And in a world of contracts, deadlines, and expectations, they built something that required no negotiation, just love, and the promise that it would always be enough.